like we started dating on.
Well, actually, it's that 2 to 3 words in one sentence, like they couldn't send
They're huge.
And then the rest of the
They're
year.
a huge December font every year.
Well, they would never forget it, but you know
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Awesome. All right, well, I think I'm gonna go ahead and get started. While I'm talking, you guys, if you haven't already, make a Figma account. Super easy. Just go to figma.com/sign up, and that will prepare you for the second half of this workshop. So today it's just Figma 101. I'm going to be teaching you guys a tool that's been really helpful for me, and that it's something that's been used throughout the industry for a very long time now, and it's really a great thing to have on your resume. So just a quick overview. We're going to talk about what is Figma. We're going to talk about how it can help. We're going to talk about how you gain inspiration for when you want to design something for UI. We're going to go into an introduction into frames, components, and prototyping, which you'll see what they do later. They're all very important for Figma design. And we're going to build our own UI. So what really is Figma? Figma basically is just a free, very, very powerful design tool. And this is something you can access by just going to a website, you make it a free account, and you'll have all your features right there waiting for you. It's used throughout the industry by many different engineers to kind of get a blueprint on what their UI is going to look like before they actually start coding it. And Figma is great for that because it has something called a dev mode, which when you switch it on, you can bring all the stuff you created in the super easy UI into code. So it saves you a lot of time when writing the code later on. And like I said, this is used widespread throughout the industry because it's great to have a blueprint and know where to start before you actually start typing lines of code. So Figma is used for both mockups and prototypes. And there is a difference between the two. So mockups are like static designs. They can be shown to like executives on what your application might look like. They can be used to share with your friends. They're pretty much the blueprint, how your application is going to look. A prototype is a little more interactive. I actually have an example of a prototype on one of these slides. So this is a prototype for a bike app. You can click the description for it if it will actually load. Yeah, a little tech issues here. Yeah, it's being really glitchy. But anyway, that is supposed to be like an interactive demo on what a prototype actually does. Basically, you're able to click through it and it functions like an actual app. And this is really nice because, again, gives you a sense of direction before you actually start doing these things. And I will be showing you how to make a prototype in today's workshop. Yeah, so a big problem that I've heard from a lot of people, and a lot of developers have this, is I don't really know where to start when thinking about UI design, because it's something that kind of remains in the back of a lot of developers' heads, like, oh, I can just get away with being really good at back end and just kind of not know any front end. And it is really important to know. And it's good to be well-rounded. Like if you want to jump into full stack development, and companies really like to see that on your resume that you're able to do both. And Figma actually makes this really easy. You don't have to be a very creative person. You don't have to be someone who's necessarily a UI expert. All you have to do is, I'll show you the steps later, just look for some inspiration and then start creating. So there's a couple ways Figma can help with that problem. It gives you a sense of direction. Like I said earlier, it gives you a very clear sense of direction. The prototyping allows you to demonstrate how the app will actually work before you actually start coding it. It's very nice with consistency. So we're going to jump into components later, but it pretty much allows you to create these consistent elements that can be used and reused throughout your application. So that way the design stays nice and consistent, which is the standard in today's industry. Figma is super easy to use. You'll see once we hop in, it's very simple. Anyone can pick it up. The UI is very intuitive, and it carries over from a lot of different applications. And my favorite part is code integration. You flip a switch, and it will show you exactly what code you need to put into your application to make it look like what you created in Figma. So this is the interactive portion, and this is what's going to take up most of the workshop. So if all of you guys could log into figma.com and just kind of give me like a nod or a thumbs up once you get in, and I would start an empty project. And you can, yeah, if you need any help, you can ask me. You can ask any of our lovely officers up here. And yeah.
Jason, what do you select when choosing a new project? Design file, Figma, border, slide deck?
Design file. Yeah, so you're going to start a new design file. Is everyone good? Awesome. My slides could move on. Sorry, guys. Yeah, this is even hitting the thing forward, it's not moving. There we go. Got it. Awesome. So first step, and arguably the most important, is finding inspiration for your UI design. And as you see over here to the left, that's a lot of the design stuff we did for the UF ACM website that's actually in place right now. So I like to separate this in two ways, and you can pretty much do this any way you want. First is to create a mood board. And I can go over a little more on how to make a mood board in a second. But pretty much there are websites like Figma Community and Dribble, which I'll demonstrate in a second, where you look up kind of the general idea and general like theme of what you want to go with, and it will pump out nice looking websites like these, things that professional UI designers have made. And it's really nice if you're not like super creative, and I know a lot of us aren't the most experienced designers, you can copy a lot of the work and change it up and kind of make it your own and kind of gain inspiration from what these professional designers have done. Another really important thing is after you get those mood boards created, is to create a font and color palette. So I'll show you some cool color palettes that you can use later, but pretty much pick some fonts that look cool, something that matches with the mood board, and pick some colors that will make your website pop and stand out. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in here, and I'm going to create a mood board. So if everyone could go to a website called dribble.com, you can search a lot of these different websites. And just so you get a feel of it, there's a bunch of different websites that have these different designs that all look really nice. And this is things that people, they get paid to put their stuff on. For today's workshop, we're going to be using this one, which is this pretty cool Figma themed website. Ours is not going to be animated, but ours is going to look very similar to this. So now that we have this, I'm having problems with the arrow again, but one second, guys. Okay. Yeah, so I also selected another one before actually when I was making this workshop. I picked this website as some of our inspiration, and then I picked this one on the left as another part of our inspiration. So kind of just has big text that says the title of our website, some nice gray text that gives us a description and a button, and then something taking up that right side of space. So how do we actually create these mood boards in Figma? This takes us to frames. Now, frames are used to kind of create a canvas, and you can put anything on these canvases. So for this workshop, we are going to create two different frames for our inspiration. So the first one we're going to make, and you make a frame by clicking this button at the bottom here, if the sizing will work. I know the zoom thing is in the way. This button right here, it says frame. You're going to click this, and for this demonstration, we're going to use a MacBook Air size, just for our mood board. So that gets put into our Figma. And the nice thing is that in our Figma project, we can put multiple frames, and they can kind of sit wherever. So I'm going to put another frame just so we can put our font and color palette in there. And this one, I'm probably going to use like an iPad size. So we have our two frames, one for our Mac, one for our iPad. And I'm going to put the stuff from our previous slide in the mood board. So I'm going to take a screenshot. And I am going to put that into our mood board.
I have a question.
Yeah, what's up?
So you like just go on Dribble and like screenshot like
Yeah.
ideas and then you just paste them into
Yeah. That's exactly what you do. So you find things that look similar to what you want to go for, and then you will put them in and paste them into your mood board. So for this, I already copied it, so I'm just going to go ahead and paste that in. There we go. So now we have a very basic, very simple mood board. Let me make it a little smaller. Awesome. So now that we have that together, we now need to select fonts and colors. And I went over this a little bit before. There are a lot of preset color palettes that you can use, or you can create your own. Inside of the workshop channel in our Discord, I included a link that has 50 different color palettes that you can use. This one has a bunch of awesome ones, and you can kind of pick whichever one you want for this project. So those are all colors that look really nice together, that could work in any way you wanted them to. So if you go to the Discord, go to the workshops channel. If you're not in the Discord, you can join it at uf-acm.com. And there's a bunch of different colors that you can pick from. In today's workshop, I think I'm going to use Gotham because I think it looks really cool. I like all the shades of purple. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it inside of my iPad mini view. And it does come out a little small, so I'm going to make it a little bigger. But I think that's looking pretty good. Does anyone have any questions about getting the color palette? Everyone's good? Okay, awesome. The next thing that we need to do is find a font, and preferably find a font that kind of matches our mood board. And we can do this by using Google Fonts. So over here, if you browse to Google Fonts, this is a great website for any project that you're making that involves any sort of custom CSS or any sort of design. But pretty much you just kind of scroll through and see what matches what we have here on the left. And I found one earlier, starts with a C. Or it's actually outfit. I just passed it. There it is. Yeah. So I feel like this looks really close to what that is, if not exactly what it is. So we're going to use outfit today for our font. So what I like to do is in making this palette, I like to go here and type out, let's say, I'm going to make the font a little bigger. ACM Figma Workshop. Okay, and then you can select it. And Figma actually already has outfit built in. So you can just search for outfit. And there we go. We have that looking nice and clean. Another thing I like to do for the font palette is to separate them based off of typefaces or how strong the text is going to be. So let's make this top one our strongest text. And we can do that by selecting this drop down that says regular, and we can change how bold it's going to be. So this looks like it would be a title text. It matches kind of what these other things on our mood board have. So then what I do from here is I duplicate it, bring something right under it, and I'm going to make it a little lighter. And then duplicate it again. And then make it a little lighter. And then I might change the color to gray, like a little grayer, just because this could be like a paragraph text, like a text that's found in a paragraph, like what's under our title here. This could be like a subheading. This could be a heading. If you've used like any text editing software, the idea is pretty similar. Also, what I like to do here is I like to put any logo that I'm using. And for this, I'm just going to use the ACM logo. If you want access to the ACM logo, you can go to, again, to that link in the Discord. There's a folder called Assets. And inside of that Assets folder, you can download all the assets that are going to be used in today's workshop. I'm going to pause a second and just make sure everyone's all caught up. If you have any questions, then let me know. If you're all good, give me a thumbs up.
You guys are good.
Is everyone all caught up? Good, awesome. Okay, so now that we have kind of a basis for what we want this to look like, what colors we're going to use, what fonts we're going to use, we're now going to make a new frame. And this is going to be our main frame that's going to be used for this. So I'm going to make it a MacBook Pro 16-inch, and I'm just going to bring it right under here. This is where our homepage of the website is going to live. And from here, we're just going to go ahead and add in a title. We're going to use this exact text, so I can just copy and paste it, or you can just bring in the different settings that you put on it individually. And I'm going to name it University Florida ACM Figma Workshop. And I'm going to make this a little bigger because this is going to be our main title text. So I'm going to make it maybe 64 size. And since it's going to be living on the left of our screen, I'm going to hit this button right here to align it to the left. It says align left. So that's looking pretty nice so far. And I'm going to let it sit right here off to the side, maybe add a little more spacing between, I can't see because of the monitor, but we add a little more spacing between the text. And then now I'm going to make a little sub text because all of these things in our mood board have text living under it. So I'm going to take this, which is already a template for our subheader text, and I'm going to drag it in. And I can make it say whatever I need it to say. So for this, I'm just going to take this is like I'm looking up the lorem ipsum sample text, which is used a lot in a lot of designs. And you pretty much you can put it in place of anything. It's kind of like the standard. It's what a lot of designers use. You can look it up online. It's called the lorem ipsum text. If not, you can put whatever text you want there. It doesn't end up mattering. So I'm just going to kind of let that sit right there. Awesome. So now I'm going to probably make it a little more gray, make a couple of changes just because I'm not entirely happy with how it looks. I'm maybe going to make it medium. And we have something that's very similar to what's already on that mood board. Now, this is a little boring because we just have this sitting here. Every item in our mood board has something sitting to the right of it. So for this, what we're going to do is we're going to use a website called Pattern Pad. And you don't have to use this website. You can pretty much use whatever you want and put whatever image you want. Pattern Pad. This is also inside of your links in the Discord. It pretty much generates these really cool patterns based off of certain colors. You can generate triangles, you can generate leaves. I already have one pre-generated from before, but you can really just generate whichever one you want depending on what colors you picked. So I use this nice leaf pattern, which ends up matching my Gotham color scheme. And it looks really nice inside of that. So now that we have that all set up, we can work on making a heading because everything in our mood board has a heading on it. Let me scroll. You can see that has a heading in it. It's the nav bar, which has the logo, a button for logging in or signing up, and a bunch of different buttons that lead to different page navigations. So I'm going to take this. I like this text for it. I think it's the right weight. It's the right color. And I'm just going to type out different things. Like let's make an about section. I might make it a little smaller. In order to do that, you just go to the right and you just adjust the size. Also, I'm going to move this in a little bit, which makes the text take up less room, which will make it easier to select it later if we need to change it. So we have our about. I'm going to make an FAQ. Okay, I'm going to make a some of the mockups have a products tab, so I'm going to make a products. It doesn't really matter what you put here. It's just for mockup purposes. And that's the really nice thing about these mockups is that they're super loose. As long as you're demonstrating what direction of design you're going with, it doesn't really matter what text you put in and stuff like that. So let's make one more. What's one example? Pricing. That's what they put. Awesome. So we have kind of a header going on. Now I'm also going to put the ACM logo there. Again, you can get that by going into the assets folder that I put in the Discord. Or you can really put any logo you want. This workshop is super flexible with doing what you want with it. Because that's the whole point of design is being really creative with it and going the direction you want to go with it. So this is already looking a lot better than what we had before. Now we need to make a button because all of these websites have buttons, and it's kind of the direction that we want to go in. In order to do this, you use the shape tool. And this shape tool can be used for lines, arrows, circles, stars, triangles, you name it. And we're going to make a rectangle, just like rectangle about this size. And we're just going to leave it like that for now. And I'm going to change the color to our color palette, something in our color palette. Now, I really like this dark blue. So I'm going to use the eyedropper to grab that dark blue. And now we have a dark blue button. But everything in our mood board has rounded corners. And you can do that pretty easily in Figma by clicking on the button and hitting this little thing under appearance. It says corner radius. Now I'm going to change this to 10. And look at that. We have nice rounded corners on our button. And now we can put text inside. So what I'm going to do is I like the size of this text. So I'm going to duplicate it again. And I'm going to overlay it and put log in on it. And I'm going to change it to white, maybe a little smaller, so it can fit inside the button. 2, and I'm going to go ahead and drag it in. Make sure over here on the left is all of your layers. Make sure your login is above your rectangle. That's what's going to make it show up. And then you can kind of zoom in a little bit and make sure that it fits inside of the center of that button. Okay, I think that looks pretty good. This is already a much better looking website. I'm probably going to make the ACM logo a little bigger just so it matches the text size of everything else in the header. And these red lines are a lifesaver because it will make sure everything's lined up. You can see the left of this ACM logo is lined up with the UF ACM Figma Workshop, all of our text here. It's lined in the center of all of this. So we're looking pretty good. Now this takes us to our next slide because we need a way to reuse this button. And this is where we get into components. Yeah, so a component, I know a lot of you have taken programming classes in the past. A component is pretty much a class in Figma. So it allows you to create duplicates of that component without reusing any code or design in this case. And the nice thing about components is they're able to be used in prototyping, which we'll get into a little more later. Components are allowed to be clicked on, components are allowed to be interacted with, and components also have a lot of different states. So over here on the left is kind of a visual example. Think of states as like inheritance for these components. You can make them rounded corners instead of straight corners. You can add a little arrow to the right of it. You can add a heart to the left of it. They're all like derived from that main base component up at the top. So these really become a lifesaver because when you get a really big website that has, who knows, 10, 20, 30 pages, and you need to reuse these buttons and all the different variations, it makes it so easy because there's a little menu that drops down with all of your components. You just select the one you want, inserts it right away. And that's just a really nice thing that they have. They also save a lot of time because who wants to recreate the same button over and over and over again and make it look the same? And consistency is a really big part of UI design. Every page you want to have the same looking button. You don't want to have a button with straight corners on one page and then a rounded button on another page. It doesn't make sense. So that's where components come to the rescue. So how do we actually implement these components here? Just pull up our example. So it's as easy as just highlighting the thing we want to create a component for, right-clicking, and then hit Create Component. Now you'll see a little purple outline on it. And see how after I create the component, I can't resize the box. So it's better to resize your text box beforehand because it extends a little bit outside of the thing. See? So we want to move this in a little bit so that way when we're working with it, we don't have the selection box hanging out of it. So go here, create your component, and it's going to turn purple. And this means that we can reuse it for as many times as we want. And all of these websites above us, they have another instance of the button up at the top right of the screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this button and we're going to duplicate it. And I might have to adjust the spacing a little bit to account for the new button that we just added. But there it is, and I think it looks pretty nice. Now, it might also be smart to make this header a component because we're going to have a lot of different pages across like different things. We're going to have an about page, FAQ page, and a pricing page, hypothetically. So we're going to select this whole thing, and we're also going to make this navbar component. Now, it's also good practice to name these components. So you name it by double-clicking on the left side, and I'm going to name it navbar. I'm also going to name this main button. Awesome. It's also nice to name your frames as well. So I'm going to name this homepage. So there we go. We have a nice looking homepage with a login button, a header, and all of this. So what is the login page actually going to do when we click it? And the answer is absolutely nothing. If I pull up my prototyping view, which you hit by hitting play, and open our website, which is not sized for this thing correctly. There we go. And I hit login, nothing's going to happen. That's because we haven't done any prototyping yet. So I'm going to speak a little bit about prototyping. Prototyping is used to make your app work. It turns what we had just then, which is considered a mock-up, into something that's actually functionable. And this is really nice because you can use it when demonstrating your app or website to different people, and you can get a lot better idea of how the app flows when you actually are going to start coding it. You can also, Figma is really nice because you can add really realistic effects within it. So it will operate very, very similar to how your app is supposed to operate once you go into production. And you can do this without a line of code, which is awesome. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So let's make a new page. Same thing, MacBook Air 16-inch. It can be anything. If you use a different size, it doesn't matter. We're going to drag this right below our main page. And this is common practice. Having all of your derived pages being directly to the left or directly to the right of the page that it's coming from. And we're going to rename this login. So we have our frame named login, and we have a frame named home. So nice thing is we already have a navbar component. So I can Control C, Control V. Bam, we already have our navbar there. It looks great. And one thing that's really nice that I forgot to mention earlier about components is that if you make a change to the main component, all the other components will reflect that change. See how I'm changing the color and it's getting changed for every single other component? That's really nice because once we get to have a lot of these things in a bunch of different places, it's really nice. You don't have to go in and individually change each one each time you want to make a change. So how do we make this prototype work? Nice thing is there's a prototype tab right there in the right corner of your screen. You click it, and there we go. We have something called interactions with a nice little plus next to it. So we want to add an interaction to this component, which means when we click it, it needs to do something. So our trigger is on click. There's a bunch of other triggers here on drag while hovering, while pressing. You can use while hovering to make like a button change a color when you're hovering over it. Mouse enter, mouse leave, same thing there. So we're just going to do on click just to keep things simple and short. And our action is going to be to navigate to. Keep in mind, there's a bunch of other awesome actions there that you can play around with on your own time. And our destination is going to be login. So that's why it's nice to name your frames because it says right there, login, super simple. It's very simple: trigger, action, destination, animation. So our animation here, I really like Smart Dissolve because it makes it look really clean. That's what we're going to do for our animation. You can change your animation time there. There's a lot of different ways you could do that. So now if we hit play on our homepage, again, change the size and hit login, it's going to take us to that blank page that we made for the login page. Now, let's flesh out this login page a little more. Does anyone have any questions with the prototyping? And is everyone kind of on the same page with that before I move any further? Awesome. Okay, cool. So we're gonna again take this title text from here or from here, and we're gonna move it to here. You can change back to your design view because we don't need a prototype anymore, and we're just gonna say login. And we can put it front and center, in the middle of our page. This page is going to be a little more boring because it's just a basic login page. If you want, you can add like leaves here or really just do whatever you want with it just to keep the theme and make sure it's sitting inside of your frame. Otherwise, it's going to stick out like that. And we are going to start creating fields to put in your username, your password, your email. And to do that, we're going to use the rectangle again. And you can make it however wide you want. It doesn't really matter. And I'm going to center it right in the middle of this page. Use the red guidelines and wait for it to center. So right there, that looks pretty centered. And we're going to make the color a little lighter because I feel like it's too dark. I think that's a good color for a login right there. And we're also going to round the corners again, just for consistency. So for this, since it's thinner, I'm probably going to use a 5-corner radius. Actually, maybe a little more now that I'm looking at it. Let's go like 8. So I think that looks pretty good for a text field. And we could put text inside of it just to say like email, like how normal websites are. Now this is a little big, so we can go to the left or go to the right, make it a little smaller so it fits inside. We're going to change the color to a lighter shade of gray or a darker shade of gray so it stands out inside of the box. And try your best to center it. It's kind of hard on this computer, but I think that looks fine. I might capitalize it. So that's a pretty good looking text box. Now you can mess around with the prototyping and make it interactive, but it's not really needed for this case because what information are we gonna, like, what are we gonna do with an email and a mockup? So next thing that we should do is create a component because we're probably gonna reuse this a lot because text field is used everywhere in an application. Create a component and we're gonna name it text field. So we have our text field. Awesome. Now we can duplicate it. I think that's a good spot. And we can change this to password. Because it's a child element, it won't change the parent. And you can change the text as much as you want. I'm going to make another field. Oops. And I'm going to call it. Also, look for those numbers between because that means that there's consistent spacing. So that means that there's 61 pixels of spacing between the top and the middle of the bottom. So those red guidelines are really going to be your best friend. We're going to add another thing for phone number. And we can do, oops, birthday maybe. Again, it doesn't really matter what you put in each one of these as long as you get the idea of what direction you want to go in. Date of birth. Awesome. So one thing's missing from this login page is we need a button to actually log you in. So we're going to create a rectangle and we're going to make a nice big button that's the size of all of these other rectangles that we have on here. We're going to center it. Looks pretty centered to me. Make the spacing a little more consistent. Okay. We're going to round the corners again because all of our other buttons have the rounded corners. And we're going to change the color to the same color as the button up top. Then we can just put text inside of the button that just says log in. And since we're stopping our design here, and I'll show you dev mode from here on, but it's still good practice to turn this into a component because we might use a larger button in the future. So I'm going to name this big button. All right, does anyone have any questions so far? All good? Okay, sweet. So we're going to dive into dev mode a little bit. And so with the base Figma accounts, dev mode is not normally enabled. In order to get access to this, you might have access to it now as a trial. Could someone tell me, like in the bottom bar, if you have this switch that I'm hovering over right now that says dev mode? You do? Okay, awesome. That used to be something that was exclusive only to pro or education accounts, and you can apply to an education account just by putting in your UF email. Okay, yeah. So make sure if you don't already have an education account, make sure you put in your UF email and apply to it. I can give you the link after the website or after the workshop. You can just come and see me and I can help you get that set up. But dev mode is super nice. And don't worry if you can't follow along. This is just to give you an idea on what it can be used for. So over here is just a basic like IDE in the web. That has an index.html file. So for those of you who aren't familiar, it's just like it has an H1, which means it has a header. It has a P tag, which means that it has a paragraph after it, and it has a button tag that shows that you can sign up. And we're going to style this because right now it looks kind of lame. It has terrible font, black and white. Like we don't want that. So since I've already set all these up, you'll go into your style.css file. For those of you who don't know, CSS is pretty much just used to apply styles to this really boring looking basic HTML. So let's do our title text first, which is our H1. Here, it shows us everything we need. Now I'm just going to copy all this and I am going to, let me just move this to the bottom, paste it inside of our H1 text. Now, one thing is that this is not going to give us our font. Right here, it says font family outfit, but our IDE has no idea what outfit is. So if I just save this and reload it, it's going to make it bigger. It's going to do the right like sizing. It's going to do the right weight, but it's not going to be able to get our font. And that's where Google Fonts really comes into play. So if I look up Google Fonts and I look for our outfit font, and I'm going to hit get font and hit get embed code. And then from here, I'm going to hit import. So this includes weight from 100 to 900, which pretty much weight just represents how bold it is, which means we're including all of our fonts here. You're going to copy this code that says import URL, and it has this whole link here. This is how your CSS knows that we need to get the outfit font. Then I'm going to go into the Figma, and I'm going to just paste this at the top of go into my IDE, and then paste this at the top, hit save, refresh, and there. We have our outfit font, which looks really nice, and it looks pretty similar to what we have in here. Now, I'm not going to do this whole web page because although it is nice to be able to copy and paste your styles, it doesn't just code all of it for you. You're still going to have to know some CSS. You're still going to have to know how layouting works because this is limited. There are some plugins in Figma that you can install that will give you all the code. And it's not perfect, but it does work. But for this case, I don't find it the most consistent, and I'm just kind of showing how it could work. If you want to dive deeper into it, we might do a second Figma workshop, but this is just kind of to get started. So I'm copying this style from the paragraph text, which is under our University of Florida ACM Figma Workshop. We're going to copy all this code, and I'm going to put it inside of our P tag, which represents paragraph text. I'm going to save it and reload. Awesome. So that looks really similar to what we have going on here. And the awesome thing is when you use things like buttons or like more complex elements, it does a lot of it for you. So we want the box of it. We want the rectangle one. So it doesn't get the component as a whole when you're doing the CSS. It does it by element. So first, we're going to get the rectangle behind the button. Now, this is going to have border radius of 10, a background of that color. So I'm going to put that in our code here. It's also important to note that the width and height that's listed here are not necessarily going to be the width and height that matches in this actual website. So I'm going to put this in just to kind of see, and we can just kind of play around with it to see how it's going to look. I feel like that's a good size because once we start putting more code in and we actually start working with some of the more layouting things of CSS, this is pretty to scale with each other. And we can scale it with the whole web page later on using your excess knowledge of CSS. And if you don't know CSS as well, there's always Figma plugins that can help with that. So then we're going to take our login button here, and we're going to just copy the code, paste it inside a button as well. So in CSS, there's a difference between color and background color. The color represents the text color, which is here. And then the background is represented by that dark blue right there. So let's just kind of see how that size works in our button. Okay, that looks pretty good. I put sign up in this case. I might make the text a little smaller. I might go to 28 pixels. Awesome. And you can see CSS kind of put a default border around it. It's probably really hard to see from the projector, but we can remove that by just saying border none. And there we go. That's pretty much how to use dev mode on a very surface level way. If you have any extra questions or if you want to go more in depth, you feel free to see me after and I can answer any questions you guys might have. But that pretty much just brings us to the end. If you guys have any questions whatsoever, again, feel free to come up or you can raise your hand now. But yeah, thank you so much for having me and I hope this helps. Yeah, also check in. Thank you. Appreciate it. What? I did. I did not get it, unfortunately.
So like, you make like a component.
Yeah.
Like when you want to change the text, like on the inside of the component
Mhm.
like that, it does that drop down thing.
No, that's different. So changing the text is fine. It does not affect like the style of the component at all. So the children, when you modify a child, does not modify the parent. That's why I accidentally made the button too big and it didn't change the button that was higher up on it because children do not modify the parent. So there's a difference between there's a main component, which is the parent component, and then there's children components is when you duplicate it, right? When you copy the component and paste it somewhere else. That's when it makes a child. So when you change the child, it does not change the parent. However, the inheritance is a little different. The graph I showed is an entirely different thing. That's called creating an instance of a component. It's a little confusing. That's when, yeah, it won't change the main object. Yeah. But when you create an instance, you're pretty much just creating an entirely new component that's an instance of that component that makes it look different. So like if you wanted like an icon to the right of it, then you could create an instance of that component with an icon and you can name it icon main button. And changing that would change all the children because it's an entire Figma thinks it's an entirely new parent.
That's like a new, that's
Yeah.
like basically a new object.
Yeah, so that's a really good shout because there is a difference between copy and pasting and creating children of a component and then making an entirely new component that's an instance of another one. Yeah, so really good question. An instance, it has a whole new menu to make it. So it's normally denoted, if I can go back to that slide, if the slides actually want to be nice to me. See how it has that slash there? Like tier/normal, tier/hover, tier/icon/right. So that's the notation that says this is an instance of this component. So yeah.
Oh, that
Oh,
was
That was called Project IDX. It's an IDE that's just lives on the web, but you can use like a VS Code or oh, you can also do that. That's one way to do it. You scroll down and then you click on like University of Florida Figma Workshop, and that should give you the code for it. And then you just copy and paste it in.
Oh, okay, but you wouldn't code it in.
No, you wouldn't. You still code it in the respective files that you would normally code it in. It just gives you like a head start and a boost on some of the CSS that you don't have to copy over.
And then this is the styling. Basically HTML.
There are some plugins on Figma that will. So Figma has like a big variety of community plugins that allow you to do pretty much anything. There's a bunch of them that have like an AI chatbot, and you tell it like, "Hey, I want to bring in this, this, and this. What would be the code for it?" All the HTML code, all the CSS code, and it would look identical. But I think you might have to pay for some of those, but there's a lot of them out there. I would definitely recommend looking into Figma plugins because you can also get like icons. Like if you wanted like heart icon next to your button, go to Figma icons plugin and then hit the heart button, and then it puts it in your project. So plugins are really, really important.
They, the tail CSS.
But yeah, there is. I have one on my Figma that helped.
Just Figma normal like it tells.
I need to check, but I think I used a plugin for it last time.
That's like
Tailwind is supported because I've used it. When we were building the website, I used Tailwind. Yeah, it's its own plugin. It's called a code gen. It did?
now. You know, like it's like the shield, like the shield, like
Yeah.
now
Now
it's CSS. Like the logos purple. And I changed it.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Yes.
Huh.
So, yeah, it's